I were to ask you all now the question, what drives you? What motivates you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What is the reason behind the work that you do? I would imagine that for a great many of you, the answer would include something like to make a difference, to make a positive impact, to leave a better world behind, to improve the lives of other people. Now, I work in Washington, D.C., and I'm guessing that when you conjure up the image of D.C., it is not exactly an image of people amicably and collaboratively working together to make a positive difference and make a positive impact. You're probably conjuring up an image of a place that is fueled by division, polarization, pettiness, infighting, and not only that, but of a place that takes that division and that polarization and exports it to the rest of the country in a way that we're all feeling it every single day in our lives. And you wouldn't be alone in thinking that. When asked in a survey, a representative sample of the American public were asked to put this country, as it is right now, on a spectrum from 0 to 100, with 0 being that everything's fine, and 100 being all-out civil war. And the average response that came back was a rather unsettling 71. Certainly not the portrait of a healthy society or a healthy country. But in spite of all that, in spite of that division and that polarization, I'm here to report to you all from DC that for all of those of us who care about using our lives to make a positive impact, that under the radar, outside of the sort of the glare and the attention of the media spotlight in Washington, D.C., in Congress, lies what I've found to be one of the greatest untapped avenues for making a positive impact in this world. And that's what I'd like to share with you all today. Now, I did not expect or plan to get into politics for a job. I had dropped out of high school and college and ended up working on political campaigns because I found that they were a line of work with a remarkably low barrier to entry. If you show up and you have a pulse and you're halfway competent, they will gratefully foist an immense amount of responsibility upon you. And so I quickly took advantage of that and spent a number of years traveling around the country, from New York to California, Texas, Kentucky, Iowa, Arizona, and many other places in between, campaigning for various candidates. And what I took away from that experience was two things. First is that despite the vast ideological and political differences that we have, there's an immense amount that we share in common. The issues we care about, the problems that we want to solve, the desire to take care of and protect our kids, our families, our communities. But the other thing that I took away was this immense disparity in the attention that we give to different parts of our political process. When it comes to getting our side, whatever that might be, to win, getting our team to win, winning any given election, we spend a huge amount of time and attention and resources. Just this year alone, it's estimated that the United States will spend over $10 billion on just this one year, on just this one very contentious election. And yet at the same time, we spend comparatively little time or attention or effort on helping those people that we fight so hard to elect, those people that we fight so hard to get them to DC, on actually helping them do stuff once they get there. And addressing that disparity is what drew me to going to DC. Now, when I got there, I found good news and bad news in Washington. The good news is that, contrary to what you might think, there's actually a ton of agreement behind closed doors in Congress on a ton of topics. So if you were to gather all 535 members of the United States House and the United States Senate and put them in a locked room and took away the cameras and the smartphones, and you were to ask them about a lot of issues, you would have 400 or 450 hands going up, the vast majority of people across both parties agreeing that we need to deal with climate change in a common sense way. We need to fix our broken immigration system, the importance of expanding economic mobility and opportunity, and on and on and on. That's the good news. The bad news is that that agreement is not translating into action nearly enough. And that is the problem that I wanted to work on solving. Now, to do that, what I did was start talking to the people on the inside. I spoke with senators, with Congress members, with chiefs of staff, the decision makers on Capitol Hill, to understand what is this disconnect. If there's the agreement, if there's a basis for consensus, why is there not more action or more progress occurring? And the answers from all those conversations, I tried to boil down into one simple formula. And I think that this really cuts to the core of how it is we unlock action and progress on the things that we all care about. There's three parts to this, and I want you to think about this from the perspective of a citizen going to your legislator asking them to do something. So when you go to your member of Congress or your legislator for whatever idea or piece of legislation or policy that you want them to promote, there's three parts. First part is, do they agree with you? Do they agree with the substance of the idea? Do they agree with it on the merits? This is the part we all think about. This is the obvious part. The second part, though, and this came up in a lot of conversations, is people saying, well, I might agree with the idea, but does it actually have a chance of getting done? Is it worth me as the legislator putting political capital and time into getting something moved forward if it's not actually going to move across the finish line? And then the third, and perhaps most important, is the risk. The risk is the part that comes up in the most conversations. In this polarized environment that we live in right now, if a member of Congress or a legislator is seen working with the other side, with the enemy, with the opposition, on trying to solve a problem, they're demonized by extreme partisan voters, by extreme partisan media, and on and on. The problem that we have right now is that we have a myopic focus on the agreement. That's the way our sort of collective conception as a society is for how we make change. If we could only get our leaders to agree with X idea or Y idea, then things would move forward, and we're driving ourselves crazy as a result. What we have to do is zoom out to look at the entire formula, and in particular, zoom in on the viability and the risk. If we can find ways to increase the bipartisan viability of these ideas, getting people across party lines and party divisions to see them in the same light, and we can find a way to reduce the risk that people face by working on them, then the propensity for legislators to actually take action would skyrocket. Now, the question becomes, okay, so how do you do that? How do you increase the viability of these ideas and reduce the risks so that more things happen? Well, there is sort of a conventional playbook that we're all told, sort of part of our cultural narrative, and it's a simple 1, 2, 3. First, you gather advocates from the outside looking in and pick the goal that you're working toward, the policy that you want to achieve, the piece of legislation that you want to pass. Then second, you gather people who think the same way that you do, who come from a shared ideological tribe to rally together for that cause. And then third, you raise your voices, you try to garner more attention, you build public pressure for the idea so that eventually you create enough pressure that your leaders cannot ignore you anymore and the thing gets done, the goal gets accomplished. The problem with this, unfortunately, is that not only does it often not work, but it actually sometimes backfires, where you create a situation where there's a camp that's super supporters for your idea, and then the other side that's super opposers of your idea. And when that happens, when there's people on one side of an issue and people on the other side, then you have a fight. And there's nothing that the media loves more than to cover a fight. And then the media starts covering it, and people get even hardened in their positions, and then it becomes impossible to get anything done. As it turns out, fortunately, there is an alternative. There is a playbook that people have been using in DC, quietly, outside of the limelight, that has proven much more effective. And it's really the opposite of that standard playbook that we're all told. Instead of picking a concept that is solely focused on what we think on the outside should be done, this approach, this playbook, centers on figuring out what do people already agree on in Congress, where is there already consensus, and making that the goal. Secondly, instead of bringing together people just from a shared tribe who all think the same way, who probably have the same politics, this approach focuses on bringing together people from different ideological tribes, people who have different politics, different points of view, coming at it from a different vantage point and bringing them together around one cause. And third, and probably the most counterintuitive, at least to me, is that instead of trying to get more attention, this playbook focuses on getting less attention, trying to keep your issue or your cause under the radar, almost boring. because by doing that, then the media doesn't activate to want to cover it because there's no big fight. You don't harden people against you, and you can actually get a lot of things done. This is not just hypothetical. This has been used to great effect over the last number of years on a whole host of legislation. I could have put 40 things up here, but I've just chosen 4. Every single one of these bills was passed in the last 10 years. They were passed under Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. They were passed under Republican Congresses and Democratic Congresses alike. The No Surprises Act banned surprise medical billing so that people are not put into debilitating debt. The First Step Act was the most consequential criminal justice reform in decades. The CHIPS and Science Act revitalized high-tech manufacturing, and the bipartisan infrastructure law, among other things, helped to invest in replacing lead pipes so that our kids can have safe and clean drinking water. Now, we don't hear about a lot of this stuff because, again, this was two sides working together to get something done. I myself had the opportunity to test out both of those playbooks, both of those approaches, on a policy issue called the child tax credit. For those of you who do not know, the child tax credit is a long-standing, very bipartisan policy idea meant to alleviate poverty for kids and families. In 2021, I and others worked together to try to get this policy expanded so it could be given to more kids. We employed that standard conventional playbook. We tried to rally together people who are of a similar ideology, of a similar politics, and raise the attention and raise the public pressure so that we could get it expanded and continued. Not only did that fail, but we ended up inadvertently polarizing the issue. So we had some people who loved what we were doing and some people who hated what we were advocating for. And that made it really difficult to get anything done. So after that, we learned from the failure, we retooled the approach, and we said, hey, let's try this more effective playbook, this more under-the-radar playbook. We brought together a new coalition with different supporters across the ideological spectrum to try to make the issue bipartisan again. And we kept the issue very quiet, very boring, and I'm happy to report that that effort, that work, resulted in, earlier this year, the otherwise notoriously, bitterly divided United States House of Representatives coming together with overwhelming majorities of both parties to vote for expanding the child tax credit, which would lift 500,000 kids in the United States out of poverty. Now, thank you. And it's an amazing story, but there's so much more where this playbook needs to be utilized if we want to get things done. Right now, as we speak, there are Democrats and Republicans in Congress working together on so many issues, and they're not getting any attention or appreciation or credit for it. They're working on everything from trying to provide paid family leave so that parents can spend time with their newborn kids. We know how important that is. To accelerating scientific research, unleashing clean energy technology and deployment, protecting critically endangered species, and on and on and on. The problem is that the responsibility is on us to adopt this new approach, this new playbook, this more effective playbook for making change so we can help our legislators and our leaders actually turn these ideas into law, to help actually get these things done and accomplished. The virtue of these things, though, is not just getting the things done, is not just the accomplishment of moving things forward and achieving progress. It actually will have some really great side effects if we do this. Because if we get more things done, what we're going to have is more serious leaders, more good leaders, actually want to go into public service in the first place. The thing that keeps me up at night, the thing I worry about as someone in DC, is that 10 years from now, if we continue on the path we're on and we don't make changes, that Congress will be filled with people who are just live streaming each other's fights in the hallway. And I don't think that's a future that any of us want to live in. But if we can make the sacrifice of public service worth it by showing leaders that if they go there, they're actually going to be able to get stuff accomplished, then we'll incentivize more people to want to serve, which then in turn can help to reduce some of the polarization and the division that we're starting to see, and that can help get more good things done, creating a positive, virtuous cycle for our country. Now, to go back to the question I posed at the beginning, what drives you? What motivates you? And to the answer that I think a lot of us feel that we want to make a positive impact. We want to use our lives to make a difference. I hope that you'll leave this equipped with the knowledge and the optimism that you can actually get enormous things done. There is a path. It's a path we don't talk about a lot, but the path is there to make this kind of progress. What it requires of us is to modernize the way that we think about making change, to update our mentality from that conventional playbook to this more effective playbook, from an approach that's focused on getting attention to an approach that's focused on getting results. And I think if we do that, not only will we unleash an era of unprecedented progress that can affect millions or even billions of people's lives for the better, but we can also begin to heal the divisions in our society in the process. And I think that's the kind of impact we could all be proud of. Thank you.